Billionaire superstar Shaquille O'Neal is standing inside a Zales jewelry store on the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia. He is wearing an oversized gray hoodie, baggy sweatpants, and plain black flip-flops. All he wants tonight is to find a simple, affordable engagement ring to give to a young couple he just met. Just another quiet act of kindness, one he practices every single day without fail. But his presence sets off a young sales clerk named Tyler. Tyler is a man running on fumes, crushed under the weight of a mother's cancer surgery bill, and a boss who is one bad hour away from firing him. When he sees this enormous stranger lingering too long near the budget ring display, something inside him snaps. He assumes the big man is blocking the aisle and wasting space. So he tells him to leave. That single moment pushes both men into a collision they will never forget. A head-on crash between fear and grace, between the cruelty of a system and the quiet power of a man who chose long ago never to become it. Will Tyler's rudeness cost him his job? And what happens when a phone call comes in just 5 minutes later telling him that his mother's $50,000 surgical deposit has already been paid in full by a kind giant? But before we get to all of that, we need to go back just a little. When the final buzzer sounded in the summer of 2011, ending nearly 2 decades of one of the most dominant careers in NBA history, the world Shaquille O'Neal had always lived inside went suddenly completely quiet. That kind of silence hits differently when you have spent your whole adult life surrounded by the roar of 20,000 fans inside arenas that shook when you walked in. The lights, the endorsement deals, the sound of sneakers squeaking on hardwood under spotlights, all of it stepped back at once. What was left was a large, still house in the suburbs, and mornings with no place to be. But Shaq was never the kind of man who stays still for long. He had grown up in Newark, New Jersey, in a house where quiet meant something was wrong. His mother, Lucille O'Neal, had kept that household moving through sheer force of will. His stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, had moved the family across military bases from Germany to Texas and back again, hammering discipline into every corner of Shaq's childhood. You did not sit. You did not wait. You worked, you moved, and you showed up. So when retirement arrived and the arenas went dark, Shaq started paying attention to the world differently. He began to notice things he had never had time to notice before. The woman at the grocery store counting out exact change, while the line behind her grew longer. The man in the hospital parking lot sitting in his car for 15 minutes before going inside. The quiet desperation that most people carry so well that nobody ever sees it. He realized something that bothered him deeply. Fame and money are a kind of glass cage. They are beautiful and warm and comfortable inside. But they separate you from everything real. You stop seeing people as people. You start seeing them as furniture in your life. Shaq decided he was not going to live like that. He made himself a simple rule. Every day he steps outside, he finds at least one stranger to help. Not in a way that makes the news. Not in a way that gets filmed. He calls them his random acts of kindness, and to do them right, he has to stay invisible. So the gray hoodie comes out, the baggy sweatpants, the plain black flip-flops that somehow fit his size 23 feet. He pulls the cap low, over his forehead, and walks slow and easy. People glance at a very large black man in loose athletic clothes, and they look somewhere else. Nobody says the name. Nobody pulls out a phone. He likes it that way. It is the only time he gets to see the world without the glass in the way. This particular December, the kind of cold that belongs specifically to Georgia in winter had settled over the Atlanta suburbs. Not the bone-splitting cold of a Midwestern January, but a damp, gray, biting chill that gets into your coat no matter how thick it is. The holiday shopping season was running at full speed. Every parking lot was full. Every family was moving fast. Inside Cumberland Ridge Mall on the western edge of Atlanta, the holiday rush was at its loudest peak. The overhead speakers pushed Christmas music down from every corner of the ceiling. The air inside the mall was a mix of smells fighting each other for space. The heavy char of grilled beef from the food court down the hall, the sweet cinnamon sugar rolling off the pretzel stand near the entrance, and the sharp, dark bite of espresso from the small coffee window tucked between a phone repair kiosk and a shoe store. Every time the tall automatic front doors slid open to let someone in From the parking lot, a cold wave rolled through the corridor and made everyone nearby pull their coats tighter. The mall was alive. Families moved in clusters. Kids ran ahead of their parents. Shopping bags knocked against ankles. And at the far end of the busiest corridor, tucked into the corner, where foot traffic was thickest, was a Zales jewelry store. Inside that store, the air was different, cooler, more controlled. The lighting came from rows of white LED strips running under the glass display cases, and the effect was clean and bright and a little cold. Rows of diamond rings sat in neat formations behind the polished glass. Necklaces on velvet stands. Earrings pinned into display boards. Everything in its place. Everything shining. And standing behind the main counter, trying to hold himself together, was Tyler, 23 years old. Face drawn tight as a drumhead. His skin had gone the color of old paper under the neon store lights. His eyes were red at the edges, from 3 nights of almost no sleep. The company dress shirt under his blue vest was buttoned all the way to the top because he had lost so much weight in the past month that the collar no longer touched his neck properly. His hair was unwashed. His hands had not stopped moving since his shift started at 2 in the afternoon. He checked his watch again. The small face of his Casio plastic band watch read 6:47 in the evening. Each second ticking past felt like a small stone dropping into a bucket that was already too heavy to carry. In the breast pocket of his vest, folded into a careful square, was a single sheet of paper. The logo at the top read Piedmont Valley General Hospital. The number printed in bold black type near the bottom read $50,000. That was the pre-surgical deposit the hospital required before they would confirm the operation scheduled for 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. His mother, Mary Vance, 56 years old, had been diagnosed with early-stage lung cancer 11 days ago. The surgery was real. The timeline was real. And the deadline on that piece of paper was 8 o'clock tonight. If the money was not in the system by 8, the procedure would be automatically removed from the schedule. His mother would go back to the waiting list. The hospital administrator had told Tyler on the phone that morning, with the careful, practiced gentleness of someone who delivers this news regularly, that the next available surgical slot would likely be 3 months out. 3 months for a tumor that the oncologist had described as aggressive and positioned in a location that made waiting genuinely dangerous. Tyler had spent the last 4 days trying to solve this. He had called his uncle in Savannah, who sent back a voice message saying he was sorry, but he had his own situation right now. He had asked his manager at the part-time weekend job he worked at the hardware store if he could get an advance on 2 months of pay. The manager had said he would ask, but never called back. He had looked into a personal loan online and been declined in 11 minutes based on his credit score. He had asked 3 friends, 2 of whom did not respond, and one of whom sent him $40 through a payment app with a note that said, "Hang in there, man." His checking account balance, as of this morning, was $4,217.83. He was $45,782.17 short. Standing a few feet behind him, moving in a slow, tight circle like a man who cannot stay still, was Henderson, the assistant manager of this sales location. Henderson was somewhere in his mid-40s, 5'8" on a good day, with a physique that suggested he had once been athletic and had let it soften around the middle over the last decade. He wore a company-issued jacket over a collared shirt, and on his left wrist he had a gold-plated watch that caught the store lights every time he moved his arm, which was constantly. He smelled like a cologne that was trying too hard and a coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago. Henderson was not a cruel man by nature. He was a frightened one. He had been passed over for the district manager position 6 months ago, and he had never fully recovered from it emotionally. He measured his worth in the sales numbers posted on the board in the back office, and Tyler's numbers were the worst in the district for the 3rd month running. Every bad number on that board felt personal to Henderson. He leaned in toward Tyler again, dropping his voice to the kind of flat whisper that is somehow louder than a shout. "Tyler, it is 6:48. You have 1 hour and 12 minutes before the close of business. Your monthly total sits at $9,300. The district quota is $15,000. If you do not close something significant in the next hour, I am not just adjusting your commission check. I am pulling the health coverage rider on your family policy. And I have 5 applications on my desk from people who actually want this job. Think about that. Tyler said nothing. He pressed the polishing cloth against the glass top of the nearest display case and dragged it slowly across the surface. It left smears instead of a shine. His jaw was working, but no sound was coming out. That was when the door opened and a young couple walked in. The man was named David. He was 26 years old and built like someone who had been doing physical labor since he was a teenager. Broad shoulders, thick forearms, a kind of permanent forward lean that came from years of bending over work. He wore a Carhartt canvas jacket in a shade of brown that had started out darker and faded unevenly from years of washing. The cuffs had a dark ring of old grease that no amount of soap had fully removed. His work boots were laced tight and carried the particular combination of mud and sawdust that meant construction sites. His hands, when he held them at his sides, looked like they belonged to someone twice his age. The woman beside him was Sarah. She wore a knit sweater in cream white that had a small pulled thread at the left elbow and a handmade wool scarf wrapped twice around her neck. She had the look of someone who is pretty in a way that has nothing to do with effort. She walked with her hand through David's arm, close, like they had been walking that way for years. They moved through the store entrance slowly, the way people move when they are not sure they belong somewhere. They looked at the display cases without touching the glass. They kept their voices low. They went straight to the far end of the store where the simpler, more affordable engagement rings were displayed. David pointed at one, a thin band with a small round diamond in a plain 4-prong setting. He looked at the price tag and then looked at Sarah. She looked back at him, and the expression on her face was not disappointment. It was something much steadier than that. Tyler watched them from behind the counter. He calculated immediately. A budget engagement ring, from that end of the case, maybe $800 to $1,200. If they paid in full, if they used the payment plan, it would count as a partial sale, much less valuable toward his numbers. These two were not going to save his month. He walked over anyway, because standing still felt impossible. He put on the customer service expression. Professional. Practiced. The kind of smile that does not use the eyes. Near the entrance of the store, something large moved into the doorway and stopped. Shaq had finished a taping for a sports commentary segment in downtown Atlanta at 5:30. He had eaten alone at a barbecue counter on Auburn Avenue, pulled pork sandwich and sweet tea, sitting at the end of the bar watching the evening news on a mounted television. Then he had driven out toward the western suburbs, with no specific plan, the way he often did on evenings, when the idea of going back to the empty house felt too heavy. He had parked at Cumberland Ridge Mall and walked in, through the side entrance, moving with that particular slow ease of a man who carries 325 pounds and has learned, over decades, to never look rushed. He had been walking past the Zales window when something made him stop. Inside the store, through the glass, he had seen the couple at the far end of the cases. He had seen the way the man's shoulders curved slightly forward when he looked at the price tag. He had seen the woman put her hand on the man's forearm in that quiet way that says, "Do not worry about it." And Shaq had stood there for a moment on the other side of the glass, and something moved in his chest that he recognized from a long way back. He went inside. He had to duck his head and rotate his left shoulder to clear the door frame. He straightened up on the other side and stood still near the entrance pillar, a wide decorative column of painted plaster that he leaned against with one hand, settling his weight slowly so the pillar would not feel the impact too much. The store was bright and cool and smelled faintly of glass cleaner and something floral from a diffuser somewhere near the back. Shaq pulled his hoodie cap down one more time and looked around slowly. His eyes went to the couple first. He watched David's rough finger hover above the glass case, without touching it. He heard the man's voice drop low when he spoke, not because he was hiding anything, but because the words he was saying felt too big for a normal volume. "I worked the overtime at the yard every Saturday for 3 months straight, Sarah. I told myself I would have enough by Christmas. I am still $400 short of the one I wanted to get you." Sarah looked at the ring in the case. Then she looked at David. "David." Her voice was quiet and completely certain. I do not need the big one. I need the one. That means we are doing this. That is all I have ever needed. Shaq stood very still behind the pillar. That moment reached past the pillar and the glass cases and the Christmas music and went straight into somewhere deep in him. Newark. The smell of the kitchen on Hilton Avenue. His mother Lucille standing at the stove in the early morning in a house that was always 3 degrees too cold in winter because the radiator on the north wall never worked right. He had grown up watching his mother make something out of nothing, not because she had no other choice, but because she believed that what you built with your own hands meant more than what you were handed. He had carried that belief with him through every arena, every contract, every version of his life that came after. He wanted to walk straight to that counter right now and settle the whole thing in 30 seconds. But he stopped himself. He had made this mistake before, years ago, early in his career. He had handed money to a man outside a gas station in Baton Rouge, just pulled out a bill and offered it, without thinking, and the look on the man's face had stayed with him for years. Not gratitude, something closer to being erased. Like the money had said you are less than me more clearly than any words could have. Shaq had thought about that moment more times than he could count. He had learned to be slow about this. He had learned to think about the shape of the help before he offered it. He stayed behind the pillar and waited. He had been standing there for maybe 12 minutes when Tyler walked over. He saw Tyler coming, and he read the situation before the young man opened his mouth. The tight jaw, the eyes that were not quite focused on him, the sweat on the forehead that had nothing to do with the temperature in the store. And in the breast pocket of the blue vest, the corner of a folded blue sheet of paper with the Piedmont Valley General Hospital logo printed across the top. Shaq had spent enough time around hospitals to know what that paper was. Tyler stopped in front of him. The top of the young man's head came to roughly the level of Shaq's collarbone. "Sir." The word came out flat and clipped like a small door shutting. "This is a retail environment for customers with active purchasing intent. You have been standing near this display case for more than 15 minutes without requesting assistance. You are obstructing the aisle space in front of our featured engagement ring collection. If you are not planning to make a purchase tonight, I need to ask you to move out to the main mall corridor." The store went quiet the way a room goes quiet when everyone in it suddenly becomes aware of what is happening, but nobody knows what to say about it. David and Sarah both turned and looked. Henderson, from his position near the back counter, felt the corners of his mouth move upward by about 3 millimeters. Shaq did not move. He stood exactly where he was and looked down at Tyler. 3 full seconds went by. The Christmas music kept playing. Somewhere in the food court down the hall, a child was laughing at a pitch that carried through walls. Shaq looked at Tyler's eyes, and he saw what was in them, and it had nothing to do with arrogance. It was something much more desperate than that. It was the look of a person who has been holding a collapsing wall up with their bare hands for so long that they no longer know what their hands feel like when they are empty. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. His stepfather's voice, clear as the day it was said. Sergeant Philip Harrison, standing in the kitchen of a base housing unit in Fort Stewart, Georgia, speaking to a 14-year-old Shaq who had just come home furious about something a kid at school had done. Don't be a reaction. Be a response. A reaction is what happens to you. A response is what you choose. Shaq exhaled slowly through his nose. "I understand," he said. His voice was low and even and carried no edge whatsoever. "Sorry to bother you." He turned, ducked slightly under the door frame again, and walked out of the store. Out in the corridor, the cold from the entrance doors had pushed further inland, and the temperature dropped noticeably as he moved away from the store. He found a wooden bench under the large artificial Christmas tree that the mall had set up in the center of the main corridor. The tree was enormous, 12 feet at least, covered in red ribbons and glass ornaments and small white lights that blinked slowly. He lowered himself onto the bench. The wood let out a sound that was somewhere between a creak and a groan, adjusting to the weight. He sat for a moment and just breathed. Then he pulled out his phone and called Bobby. Bobby Marks had been Shaq's personal foundation manager for 11 years. He was the kind of man who answered the phone on the second ring no matter what time it was, and never asked unnecessary questions. "I hear you," Bobby said. "You found someone." Bobby, I am at Cumberland Ridge Mall on the west side of Atlanta. There is a Zales store here. One of the sales clerks is a young man named Tyler. I saw the name on his badge. He has a pre-surgical deposit notice in his breast pocket from Piedmont Valley General Hospital. I need you to call that hospital right now. Find out which patient is connected to that young man. Find out what the surgery costs and when it is scheduled and what the payment deadline is. Give me 5 minutes, Bobby said. Shaq put the phone on his knee and watched a father and a small daughter moving slowly past the Christmas tree. The girl was pointing at the ornaments one by one, asking the name of each one, and the father was answering every single question with complete patience. Shaq watched them until they moved past the bench and disappeared around the corner toward the food court. He thought about Tyler's face, the shaking hands on the polishing cloth, the way the young man's voice had been trying to sound controlled and had not fully succeeded. He thought about what it cost a person to stand up that straight when everything inside them was falling. For minutes and 40 seconds after the call ended, his phone buzzed. Got it. Bobby's voice was quick and tight. Patient name is Mary Vance, 56 years old. Room 402 on the surgical prep floor. Diagnosed with early-stage lung cancer, tumor positioned in the upper left lobe. Surgery is scheduled for 7 tomorrow morning. The hospital requires a $50,000 pre-surgical deposit to confirm the procedure. Deadline for payment is 8 o'clock tonight. Current account balance on file for the Vance family is insufficient to cover the deposit. If payment is not received by 8, the system automatically removes the patient from tomorrow's surgical queue and returns her to the general waiting list. Estimated wait time for the next available slot is approximately 90 days. Shaq closed his eyes for 1 second. 90 days. Pay it now, Bobby. Use the anonymous foundation account. Wire the full $50,000 directly to Mary Vance's patient file at Piedmont Valley. No names attached to the transfer. No mention of me or the foundation name. Listed only as a donation from an anonymous fund. And have the hospital finance office call Tyler Vance directly within the next 5 minutes to confirm. He needs to hear it before 8. Can you move that fast? Money will clear in under 2 minutes, Bobby said. I will have finance call him in 4. The line went quiet. Shaq sat on the bench for another moment. He put the phone in his sweatpants pocket and pressed both hands flat on his knees. He looked up at the Christmas tree. The small white lights blinked on and off in their slow, patient rhythm. He thought about something his mother used to say. She used to say that the best thing you can do for a person is give them back the thing they were about to lose. Not something new, the thing they already had. He stood up and walked back toward the store. He was going to need a reason to go back in. And he had just spotted one. About 40 feet down the corridor, standing near a mall directory board, were David and Sarah. They had left the store a few minutes after the confrontation and were standing now in that particular way of two people who have made a quiet decision together. David had his arm around Sarah's shoulders, and she was leaning into his side, and they were not looking at the directory. They were just standing there, very close, very still. Shaq walked toward them. He slowed as he approached, making himself smaller in the way that he had practiced for years, dropping his shoulders, reducing the forward weight of his posture, softening the outline of himself, so as not to come in at a person like a moving wall. Hey, he said. They both looked up. Up close, Shaq let the hood fall back, just slightly. Not enough to announce anything. Just enough to let his face be visible in a normal way. I saw you two in the store a few minutes ago, he said. I heard what you said to each other by the case. About the ring. He paused. I would like to go back in with you and take care of that, if you will let me. David looked at him. Sarah looked at him. Then they looked at each other. Sir, we cannot let you do that, David said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were confused. We do not even know you. You do not need to know me, Shaq said simply. I just need to know you are letting me. That is all. There was a silence that lasted about 4 seconds. Then Sarah said, quietly, Okay. The three of them walked back to the store together. Inside the break room at the back of Zales, Tyler was sitting on the floor with his back against the door and his face in his hands. After the large man in the gray hoodie had walked out of the store, after David and Sarah had quietly excused themselves and left, Henderson had come in fast. His face was flushed red, and he was holding his gold-plated watch up in one hand like evidence at a trial. 7:15, Tyler. You have 45 minutes. You pushed out a potential high-value customer. Then you let a young couple walk out the door behind him. I am done waiting. You close something in the next 45 minutes, or I send the termination notice to the regional director tonight. And the insurance coverage ends when you clock out. Tonight. Are we clear? Tyler had not said anything. There was nothing left to say. He had walked to the break room and closed the door and slid down against it until he was on the floor. He sat there in the dark with his mother's face in his mind and the sound of Henderson's shoes walking away on the tile and the Christmas music coming faint through the walls. I am so sorry, Mom, he said to no one. His voice was barely a sound at all. I tried everything. I am so sorry. His phone was on the floor next to his right knee. The screen showed 7:32 in the evening. 28 minutes before the deadline. He picked it up and stared at the number, as if looking at it long enough might change it. The phone lit up. An Atlanta area code. A number he did not recognize. He pressed answer. His voice came out in pieces. Hello. Am I speaking with Tyler Vance? A woman's voice. Measured. Professional. Warm in the particular way of someone who is delivering news they know matters enormously. Yes. This is Tyler. Is this about my mother? Please do not cancel her surgery. I am working on getting the money. I just need a little more time. I can. Mr. Vance. Her voice was gentle but clear. Please take a breath. My name is Carol Hendricks. I am the Director of Patient Financial Services at Piedmont Valley General Hospital. I am calling to inform you that your mother's surgical procedure tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock will proceed as scheduled. Tyler's back came off the wall. He stood up in the dark without realizing he was doing it. I don't understand, he said. The deposit. The $50,000. I have not paid it. I do not have it. The deposit has been paid in full, Mr. Vance. The transfer cleared our system approximately 3 minutes ago. $50,000 was wired directly to your mother's patient account from an anonymous charitable fund. The donor has requested complete privacy. Their representative simply asked us to call you immediately so that you would not spend another minute worried about tomorrow. Tyler stood completely still in the dark break room. His phone pressed against his ear. He heard his own breathing. He heard the Christmas music coming through the wall. He heard nothing else. There has to be a mistake, he said. His voice sounded like it belonged to someone standing very far away. I do not know anyone with that kind of money. There has to be. There is no mistake, Mr. Vance. We have confirmed the transfer against your mother's file. Room 402. Mary Vance, 56 years old. Surgery at 7 tomorrow morning. All confirmed. A brief pause. The donor's representative did leave one short message to pass along to you. It reads, from the fund of a kind giant. Tell him to keep going. His mother is going to be fine. A kind giant. The words landed in Tyler's chest like something physical, like a hand pressing flat against his sternum and staying there. And then the image came back. That enormous shape in the gray hoodie, standing quietly near the engagement ring case. Those steady eyes under the cap brim. The man he had walked up to and told to leave. Tyler's legs started to go. He caught himself against the wall with one hand. He said thank you. He did not know if the words came out correctly. He ended the call. He stood in the dark for about 4 seconds. Then he pushed through the break room door and came out into the store moving fast, his face soaked, his eyes red and blown wide open. He looked at the counter. He looked at the floor. He looked toward the entrance. Henderson stepped into his path. Tyler, what in the world are you? Tyler walked around him. He got to the entrance and looked out into the corridor. And there they were, coming back down the hall. 3 figures. A young man in a faded work jacket. A young woman in a cream sweater with a scarf. And between them, and slightly ahead, a shape so large it was unmistakable from 50 feet away. Gray hoodie. Slow walk. Flip-flops. They came through the entrance together. Shaq walked directly to Tyler's counter and reached into the front pocket of his sweatpants. He pulled out a worn black leather wallet, the kind that has been sat on in a back pocket for so long that one corner is permanently curved. From inside the wallet, he drew out a card. He set it face up on the glass surface of the display case and slid it slowly across toward Tyler. Tyler looked down at the card. It was black, not the black of a regular credit card. This was something heavier. Metal, matte on the surface, with a faint texture that caught the light differently. At the lower right corner, pressed into the surface in raised gold lettering, were two words. Shaquille O'Neal. The room did not spin. Tyler was very aware of everything. The hard edge of the glass case under his fingertips, the sound of the receipt printer somewhere behind him that was not printing anything, the faint smell of the glass cleaner they used on the cases every morning. He was aware of all of it at once, very precisely, as if every detail had suddenly sharpened. He raised his eyes. Under the hood, at this distance, with the store lights falling directly onto that face, there was no version of the world in which Tyler did not recognize who was standing in front of him. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He tried again. Shaq raised one finger to his lips. Slowly, a signal between them. Just between them. No stars in here tonight, Shaq said. His voice was low and warm and completely easy. Just a regular customer trying to buy an engagement ring for some friends. Can you help me finish this? Tyler's shoulders came up, and then forward, and then down, all at once, like something that had been held rigid for a very long time finally releasing. The tears came, without any warning, the way they come, when you have been holding everything in for so long that the moment something opens, the pressure just goes. He bowed his head. Both hands went flat on the glass case. He was shaking. Sir. The word barely made it out. I am so ashamed. What I said to you earlier. The way I spoke to you. I had no idea. I am so sorry. I had no right to treat you that way. I am so. Shaq reached his right hand across the top of the display case and placed it on Tyler's shoulder. One hand, enormous and warm and completely still. It did not grip. It did not squeeze. It just rested there, the way a hand rests on something it is not trying to control. Hey, Shaq said. Look at me. Tyler raised his head. I saw that paper in your pocket, Shaq said. I know what kind of day you have been having. I know what it feels like to be that scared about someone you love. We all have days where the weight gets so heavy that it comes out sideways and lands on the wrong person. I am not angry at you. Not even a little. He paused. You were fighting for your mother. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is the most important fight there is. You hear me? Tyler nodded. He could not stop the tears, and at some point he had stopped trying. Good sons deserve good things to happen to them, Shaq said. Now run this card. Those two have been waiting long enough. Henderson had been watching all of this from about 12 feet away, and he had spent the last 90 seconds in a state of rapid recalibration. He could not see the name on the card from where he stood, but he could see the weight of it. He could see the way Tyler was holding himself. He could see that the large man at the counter carried the particular stillness of someone who is used to being the most powerful person in any room they walk into, not because they announce it, but because they do not need to. Henderson moved forward. His hand reached toward the card on the counter. Shaq took one step to his left. It was a small step. Almost nothing. But his body filled the space between Henderson and the counter so completely that Henderson's hand stopped in the air, as if it had run into glass. Henderson looked up. He was looking at a chest. He tilted his head back further and found a face looking down at him, with an expression that was not hostile, but was absolutely final. This transaction is Tyler's, Shaq said. The warmth was still in his voice, but the register had dropped. He helped me tonight. The commission is his. Every dollar of it. Are we clear on that? Henderson's mouth opened. Sir, I am the assistant manager of this location. I just want to make sure you receive proper. I don't need to know what you are, Shaq said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. I need you to know what I am about to tell you. The card on that counter can purchase this entire retail chain if I decide I feel like it one afternoon. If I find out tomorrow that this young man has been let go or treated differently because of tonight, I will make one phone call to the corporate chairman of this company. Everything connected to my name in your marketing materials, your partnerships, your endorsement deals, disappears the same day. Not a threat. Just a fact. Do you understand? Henderson went the color of copy paper. The gold watch on his wrist caught the light one more time as his arm dropped to his side. Tyler is one of our finest associates, he said. His voice was barely working. We value him. Completely. No concerns. Shaq looked at him for one more second, then turned back to Tyler. "Run the card," he said warmly. "They are waiting." Tyler picked up the card with both hands. He entered the transaction on the terminal with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who is aware that their hands are still not completely steady. The receipt printer came to life and ran its familiar rolling grind across the paper. Tyler tore the receipt, placed it and the card on the counter, and set the small red velvet ring box beside them. Shaq signed the receipt. He picked up the box. He turned and walked the few steps to where David and Sarah were standing. The two of them had watched all of it unfold from the middle of the store floor. They had understood pieces of it. Not all of it. Not yet. They did not know the name on the card. They did not know what the conversation between the large man and the manager had been about in full. But they knew the texture of what they had witnessed. They knew they had seen something. That did not happen every day. Shaq stopped in front of them and bent his knees slightly, bringing his face down to a closer level. He opened the velvet box. The ring inside caught the LED light and held it. He placed the box in David's rough hands. Then he closed both of his large hands around David's and held them there for just a moment. "This is a gift from me to both of you," he said. "Hold on to each other through the hard parts. The love you have between you tonight is worth more than anything in any case in this building. No diamond in this store comes close to that. Build something good together." David stared at the ring, then at the man in front of him. His throat was working, but nothing was coming out. Sarah pressed her face sideways into David's shoulder and let the tears go quietly, the way you cry when something good happens so fast and so completely that your body does not know what to do with it. "We do not know how to thank you," David finally said. "We do not even know who you are." "You do not need to know," Shaq said. "Just do the same for someone else when you get the chance. That is enough." He gave David one firm, brief pat on the arm. Then he turned back to the counter. He looked at Tyler one last time. "Take care of your mother," he said. Tyler stood straight. He pressed his right hand flat against his chest, over his heart. His head went down low. His voice came out barely above a breath. "Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. God bless you." Shaq pulled his cap down one last time. He turned and walked toward the entrance. He ducked his head and rotated his shoulder through the door frame and stepped back out into the mall corridor. The cold hit him immediately. Out beyond the glass walls of the building, the parking lot lights showed the first real snowfall of the Atlanta winter. Small flakes, thin and dry, turning slowly in the orange glow before settling onto the hoods of cars. The temperature had dropped another 4 degrees since he had come inside. He walked through the corridor toward the far exit, moving easy, taking his time. Shoppers moved around him in both directions. No one stopped. No one called a name. He was just a very large man in a gray hoodie, walking through a mall on a cold December night, with his hands in his pockets, and nowhere in particular to be. But on the 4th floor of Piedmont Valley General Hospital, a woman named Mary Vance was resting in room 402, and her surgery was confirmed for 7 in the morning, and her son was not afraid anymore. And in a Zales jewelry store on the western edge of Atlanta, a young man named David was holding a ring box with both hands, while the woman beside him cried the kind of tears that come only from relief and love arriving at exactly the same time. And somewhere in a mall break room, Henderson was sitting alone at the small table, staring at his gold-plated watch and thinking very carefully about the kind of man he wanted to be tomorrow morning. The man in the gray hoodie pushed through the exit doors and stepped out into the Georgia night. He never looked back. He never did. That was always the whole point.